Yanena Sudrishtam Bhavitram Miha Vidyate Tatvayam Yoga Samsiddhaha Kalenat Vani Vindate Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. In all the worlds, there is no purifier like knowledge. Those who are perfected in yoga realize this fact in due time. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. We try and keep a constant presence, and we have this time of satsang, which is an hour in which we can dedicate our thoughts to Brahman alone, and all the subtopics, you might say, that fall under that major heading. Brahman meaning divine reality, if you want to put it a little bit in bhakti terms, or possibly you could say pure conscious awareness, if you want to go more towards the Advaita Vedanta, pure consciousness schools. But called by various names in the different religious traditions of the world, as we heard said in many of our chants from the Upanishads. So if we put our minds on Brahman, then it'll trickle down, as it were, into the realm of name and form. The greatest name and form being our Ishtams, that is, the great souls who are known to be the founders of religions, if they appear in a religion at all, or possibly they come down out of non-dual samadhi and show themselves to the world in a particular lifetime. And we have one of those great souls on good record in the recent times with our own Ishtam, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and all the great souls that came with him, including the Holy Mother, which is the mother of our order. It's the Param Guru, the guru of my guru, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him. And he passed on to us this great non-dual philosophy, if it can be called a philosophy, this great path of life, which is eternal, Sanatana, in which we look to for instructions on how to keep our minds balanced, as I just chanted, in higher wisdom. So there's another thing we can focus our minds upon, this great non-dual wisdom that is so inspiring to the seers. Seems to be enough for most of them, this knowledge of Brahman and this love of God, called, for instance, Brahma Gyan in terms of wisdom, and Prema Bhakti in terms of divine love, or these two wings of the bird, as my teacher used to call them, love and wisdom, that help the soul soar. And the soul here, of course, meaning this embodied body-mind mechanism with its hopefully ripened ego position. So there's this ultimate overall witness of all phenomena, Saksha Hamkara, because a Hamkara means self. So there's this witness self. And then there's this Deha Jasa Hamkara, this small self, which is manifesting itself in our various activities, and through which we try and ripen through our spiritual practices, called sadhana. And for that, we take recourse to Dharma and Atma Gyan, and try and live a balanced life, not out of step with morality and ethics, but also in Vedanta trying to transcend them, put them in their place and transcend them, so that we can go on to these higher teachings. Then the mind can focus itself in upon this vibration, which begins to become more and more neutral as the soul approaches the higher vibrations of pure conscious awareness to such extent that they maybe pass through what we call the word or Om, where all vibrations meet, like oceans meeting at the ocean. I'm sorry, rivers meeting at the ocean. And when they meet, there's a confluence there. Everything becomes this one mass of pure conscious awareness. Chid-Gana. It's called various names again, and different levels of samadhi that occur, or nirvana that occur when the mind shuts down its vibrations. And pretty soon, in the early stages, one is practicing that to keep the mind from becoming imbalanced or from vibrating too much. Because when it vibrates, it in all its power tends to create worlds of name and form in time and space. Especially when you get so many minds thinking that way, so many separate minds. But then these vibrations become quelled, and then the soul gets this beautiful view of the vast ocean, as it were, without waves. And as Sri Ramakrishna has said, sports there, like a goldfish just released from its bowl into this vast body of water. And it has this very profound experience of vibrationless reality, beyond the word, beyond the cosmic mind, and into the vast depths, profound depths of Brahman. And all of this, of course, has a vibrational order. So if you want to put it in simplest terms, in terms of human beings, they have what's called waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states. And so they're constantly engaged in this game of vibrations, you might call it. And this journey of entering into worlds and imagining worlds, envisioning worlds, and then dissolving worlds back from where they came into this projection power of the mind called sankalpa. So all of this we have been studying over many, many years as the teachings were brought to us by authentic luminaries from India. And then we keep our minds on them day to day so that they begin to make more and more sense to us and begin to replace some of these incomplete theories that we've been getting as we grew up, like the creation theory and like the evolution theory. Some of these are incomplete because they need to come full circle, like the Vedanta expresses it. You have to have involution, a place to return to after this evolution is over. So this involution means starting back on the return journey that the Divine Mother of our thoughts, the Chit Shakti, takes us on when we place our attention on her in our minds, this Shakti power. And she wants to and will allow us to strip all name and form away from nature and see it at its seed, in its seed form, and then see that all those seeds are within us and always were within us. And then allow us to, or show us how to quit watering those seeds with the power of our mind's projection. And have that option of burning the seeds over the fire of knowledge, as Sri Ramakrishna has said, so that no more manifestation, particularly of things that are not under our control, will take place anymore. And there you have a soul that's returned to a state of its original condition, pure conscious awareness, we were calling it. So this process is done consciously, or if it is done consciously with awakened awareness, then one becomes this perfected yogi I was just chatting about at the beginning of class, or the perfected yogini. These beings focus their mind upon divine reality and quell all the waves of vibration of the mind. Daily they practice this, and they stay in a state of sthiti pragnasya, as Krishna says in the Gita. We're coming up, that's steady wisdom. And we're coming up on August, which has its wonderful holy day of Janmashtami in it, where we celebrate Sri Krishna's birthday. So we'll be focusing in on him, reading the Bhagavad Gita, the Uddhava Gita, and other great scriptures that speak of him and his predecessor, that is, whom he was an emanation of, Sri Ramchandra. And we'll look towards those great teachers as these illumined souls who always come back in mastery of this process of manifestation and non-manifestation, or projection and withdrawal. They do it sort of as a play, but in their play is this hidden agenda of saving beings from the habit of rebirth, from the habit of birth, life, and death, from cycles that can lead to suffering in samsara. If one begins to only follow the dictates of the individual self, that deha jasa hamkara, and forgets that they're really the saksha hamkara, the witness of all phenomena. So all of these, of course, are teachings out of the great non-dual philosophy or non-dual path of Advaita Vedanta. And I'm waiting to hear if you have any questions or any insights or any comments from your last week's work, since I've all seen you all last, in the realm of sadhana, that is spiritual practice, which at least some of us, particularly in the Ramakrishna order of the world, think is most important, that you can't just repeat some words, some mantras and so forth, and then assume that the soul has been realized, but have to do this extra work or sadhana to detach yourself from phenomena, especially from reaction to phenomena, because phenomena will rise and fall natural anyway. But the real art of the whole thing for the illumined yogi or yogini would be to make sure not to react to phenomena, but instead to just realize divine reality within. Don't idealize the real. Realize the ideal, as my teacher used to say. And that will take you beyond personalities and principles to the supreme goal. That's, of course, the direction of the Vedantist, that the Vedantist is moving in, if he or she moves at all. There's that one transformation that's allowed of all things that transform. Because if they transform, they're showing themselves up to be a part of the changing Maya instead of the unchanging Brahman. So there's that one unchanging reality and one transformation, Vivekananda says, that's the only one that's going to be allowed, the best one for the evolving soul, if the expression can be used, would be the transformation of mind. So we work to change that mind to its original state, original mind, or purified mind, or in the highest sense, they sometimes even say no mind, when those vibrations begin to stop and one can focus in on just the reality alone. So at least at our satsangs once a week, we're giving ourselves an opportunity to do that in a group, because one has to do it alone on one's own. It's the flight of the alone to the alone. Sometimes we call that superlative spiritual path, the flight of the alone to the alone, because there's always just one. It's always just one of us. And we're appearing as many, but we see beyond the appearance to this divine oneness, or not two-ness. And that allows us this great boon and privilege to be able to then meet with the many and talk about Brahman, like we're doing right now. So who can come forward with something and offer something that we can consider, particularly in the realm of practice and attainment, or question and answer, sometimes called Atma Vichara, inquiry into the nature of reality. Samanvaya has something to offer us.
Yes. Namaste, Babaji, and everyone. My question is, Brahman is Sat-Chid-Ananda, but is Brahman self-aware of these qualities, these attributes, these qualities in which it is? Is there self-awareness on the part of Brahman that it is Sat-Chid-Ananda?
Well, if you're describing or defining Sat-Chid-Ananda as pure consciousness, pure existence, pure consciousness, and pure bliss, or pure existence, pure knowledge, and pure bliss, and you're taking Sat-Chid-Ananda into three great undivided divisions like that, then of course you would be posing a slight difference between Brahman and Sat-Chid-Ananda, when there really is none. They're just names for the same reality. But Sat-Chid-Ananda allows us to look at these three great points that are existent in and make up what we call Brahman. That is pure existence, which is non-dual, homogeneous, all-pervasive, and free of divisions. That's pure existence, and Chid, and then and Sat, which is the truth, and pure bliss, which is the Ananda side of things. So it might have been that there were schools in India that were following just one of these to the ultimate position, and then later on did not want to contend with each other and make Brahman a matter of argumentation, and decided that they're three in one, that Brahman is three in one, Sat, Chid, and Ananda. And so put those together into one beautiful word for divine reality. And yes, that is Brahman. It's it is awareness. So to call it self-aware brings in a word that has oftentimes caused some contention with philosophers in India. Self. For instance, the Buddhists don't like the word self that much. It has a connotation to it that smacks of the individual, and the individual gets transcended when one focuses the mind perfectly on divine reality, and the mind itself dissolves like a hailstone into an ocean, or the great mind itself, even Mahat, will dissolve like an iceberg into an ocean. Even the forms of Ishvara, which are so great, will also dissolve under the sun of non-dual wisdom into the ocean. but they'll keep a semblance of memory of themselves for the next cycle. So when beings come back, they will always remember words like names like Krishna or Ram or Jesus or Buddha. Those beings will stay. Those names will of these great beings will stay in the minds of billions of souls, and then they will need to be remembered when they take on this ego mechanism we were just talking about. So that self and ego, they have to be defined cautiously and carefully, so that no misunderstanding is going on in the philosophy of Brahman, or which is called best of all Vedanta, the wisdom of the ancient Vedas, and that then came to us through the Upanishads. So, yes, I think self-aware is a word. Self-luminous, Swayam Jyoti, is a way of expressing the nature of reality, but it might be that it's just all awareness. You see, it doesn't have any barriers, and it shouldn't. Lines shouldn't be drawn on water in that case, to make the water seem like two or three or many. Let that just be called the rising and falling of phenomena, and let the mind focus just on that one ocean of awareness, pure conscious awareness. And then let the schools that want to talk about self do so if they want to. Gaudapada says that in his Karikas. They will, that all beings will eventually dissolve into that. So at that point, when they do dissolve, they will be self-aware. They'll be aware of the one indivisible self, and all the individual selves will merge and dissolve. And then there will be nothing other than the self or the reality to describe the self as other than being reality. So as Brahman self-aware, it's all aware. It's sarvosmi. It's all in all. Maybe we can get a clue to this through Divine Mother herself, when she is all-knowing and contains all knowledge within her, yet she doesn't even know herself the extent of her own knowledge. Times this philosophy is put like that. Or it could be said that if Brahman is all-pervasive and everywhere and indivisible, if you use those words, that there is a focusing power in it that allows it to focus like a third eye, sort of like a laser, on any given part of its indivisible self. See what I mean? So it'd be like having an ocean of light, which is undivided, but there's a power in it that's able to focus some of that light on one particular element of itself and light it up in an intense fashion to reveal whatever it wants. It's sort of like samyama in yoga, where you put together concentration, meditation, and samadhi to shine the light on any given thing that you want to know about. It's a great power that the masterful, the perfected yogis possess, so they can see through time, and they can return name and form to the seed form of nature. And when it's when it's needed to unite oneself with Brahman, so that all selves, all other selves, or masqueraders, masquerade selves will disappear or dissolve, then they'll be able just to see straight into that indivisible Brahman and know themselves to have always been one with it. To say that to become one with it, was sort of indicates that there was a sort of play going on there of two. But they will go beyond that play of two-ness. They'll see that it was more that they were always one with that Brahman. And the separation process happened by this assumption of a second self. So in that way, I guess I'm talking around the point about being cautious about the word self, even when you put it together with self-awareness. I would say all awareness is it's all awareness. Yes, Jyoti, you have something.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, everyone. I was kind of wondering, in the dissolution of the mind stream process, where Ishvara would fall, or the Ishtam actually would fall in the dissolution process, if it's on either side of Om, the sound, or kind of one with it. And then I guess, I'm asking, kind of if Ishvara as well could be thought of along the dissolution of the mind stream process. So I guess those two questions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mano na buddhi na sharim na indriyam na tanmatram na bhutani na bhuta panchakam, Shankara says in the Viveka-Chudamani. And when he talks about the dissolution of the mind and all the things that must return to it, again, sort of like rivers to, let's say, rivers to the bay, and then all the confluence of the rivers and the bay into the ocean themselves. As far as name and form are concerned, then we'd have Ishvara as being the ultimate goal. But a lot of the seers in India were non-dualists and Advaitas. And even we saw the yogis in yoga, in the Yoga Sutras, there's not a lot of mention about Ishvara. There's only 2 or 3 slokas in all those slokas of Patanjali's Padas that mention Ishvara. So I think not so much a penchant for God with form in Indian philosophy as there is in Western religion. Western religion's all about salvation with the form. But in India, you had this very strong turning towards not salvation, but liberation. And it had to get beyond name and form, and it had to even proceed into, so we go back to that word that we were just trying to describe earlier, self. It goes back to this self-knowledge, or the one self in all. Vivekananda has put that nicely. There is but one, the free, the knower, without a name, without a form. In it is Maya, dreaming all this dream. The witness, it appears as nature, soul, and thou art that. So that particular kind of dissolution that I just mentioned in that verse didn't say anything about cosmic principles, tattvas, didn't say anything about Ishvara, the divine form. It was just this pure Advaitic look at the self with a capital S, the Atman, that has no other source than itself and doesn't give rise to anything. everything comes out of it naturally. It's not a source of anything. They often say that about Brahman. It cannot be the cause of anything. So whenever you start thinking in this other manner, which includes Ishvara all the way down through the worlds of name and form and time and space, all the way down to the 5 elements, then you're speaking of something that has to do with Mahat, you see, the great mind. So if you talk to a Advaita Vedantist about the appearance of the universe and your devotion to God, they'll immediately defer or revert back to the Mahat. Vivekananda himself does that quite often. It's all the mind manifested in everything is their take on it. And so that's the purity of that particular run of thinking that happens to be most faithful to the non-dual. Like asking Shankara, or telling or accusing even Shankara, as they did sometimes, of having no devotion to Ishvara, which is of course preposterous, because he started off all his scriptures, salutations to Govinda, so I don't know where they get these ideas. But anyway, when the philosophy starts flowing forth from Shankara, which it did in all his scriptures he wrote. I mean, he wasn't just a Shiva avatar, he was also a composer of great scriptures. You don't get that in one person very often. So anyway, when you ask Shankara about that, or tell him, where's your devotion to Ishvara? He says, my devotion is to discrimination. So he wants to discriminate away all of these things, not just discuss how unreal they are, or not just talk about them in terms of their cosmic order, how they came out of the mind. He just wants to. That's why I just quoted him. Mano, na buddhi, na sharira, na indriya, na tanmatram, na bhutani, na bhuta panchakam. All of these are, I'm dissolving the mind and the intellect. I'm dissolving the senses. I'm dissolving the subtle senses. I'm dissolving the bhuta, all the forms, all the worlds, all the people that are in all these forms, and the bhuta panchakam, all the 5 elements. I'm dissolving all of these back into the ultimate. And that's the practitioner of blissful dissolution you're talking about. They get vilapya shantim paramam bhajasva. They get vilapya shantim means they get this eternal peace, and they get param bhajasva, that means ecstatic, unalloyed ecstasy, supreme parama bhajasva, ecstasy. So that's what they want. If there's any business they're about, that's the business they're about right away. They're not playing around for any length of time with Maya. They know what it is. They've categorized it. They've seen it. They withdraw from it, and they beat a hasty retreat from it. And then they put all their energies on, as I was talking about at the beginning of this satsang, day by day, keeping the mind absorbed in Brahman. Some of our God blogs were about that this week. So in an hour and a half or so, we can speak about those if you come back to join us.
Thank you.
I think with a unique soul like Vivekananda, because of course time passes, although evolution goes on, and most of the things go the way of the yugas. So they try to get down to the Kali Yuga here, and there's so much darkness of thinking, and darkness of manifestation, darkness in their actions and all that. But there are some beings that go the opposite way. The darker it gets, the more light they see somehow. And Vivekananda was one of those. I think even beyond Sankara. And so he can come forward from the Advaitic perspective, and he can tell you Ishvara is the greatest of all forms. There's no form greater than that. Sometimes he'll even be funny about it, like say he's like the king of the monkeys. You see all the monkeys are gadding about, and in the jungle you see, and they get into fights about who owns what and all sorts of things like that. You see. Adharmic actions and so forth. And so the king of the monkeys settles it all. And they know that he will, so they go to him and say, this banana is mine, not his. He says it's his. See, and they're fighting over it. So the king of the monkeys decides who gets the banana and who doesn't. And so he'll use funny analogies like that, about this human condition we're in of name and form, and all these silly things we're thinking and doing. This constant folly, and how it gets settled by the king of name and form. That would be Ishvara, or we like to turn it towards Ishvari, like towards Divine Mother. To the Divine Feminine is something that she's really the same. The good Lord and the Divine Mother of the universe are, Shiva Shakti. They're one and the same. They do have their own atmosphere and work together, no doubt. But it's in this day and age, in the Kali Yuga, particularly with Sri Ramakrishna bringing Sri Sharada Devi into manifestation as Divine Mother of the universe. He called her manifestation of Lakshmi, Saraswati, and Kali, and Parvati, all in one. There are songs sung about that. In fact, the song we put out on the YouTube about that has gotten thousands and thousands of hits. It's like that's the song everyone really loves to hear. So that's what I'm saying basically, is that we like to give this Ishvara word a feminine turn in the Ramakrishna order towards the divine goddess, because in an age that's fraught with the problems of man and mankind, there's a ray of light there in the divine feminine that can penetrate through and attract people. She attracted both our founder, Lex Hickson, talking in terms of SRV, and myself. And we used to talk about that. When we read the gospel, that was the main thing that stood out to us, was Divine Mother reality. We had not heard of it in this lifetime. We recognized it right away, so we must have heard about it in other lifetimes. But in this lifetime, it was brought forward to us again by the Gospel of Ramakrishna, sitting on the shelves of the Vedanta Society of New York, thanks to Swami Nikhilananda's work, and that was our founder's guru. And then Swami Ishvara bookstore when I went to the Vedanta Center in Portland. And both Nikhilananda and Ishvara were initiates, were initiated by Holy Mother. So that's how SRV has its deep source and root in Divine Mother reality. So that seems to take the teaching of Ishvara and make it even more powerful and more pointed. And so it can, if Maya is such a problem to people, then you need Mahamaya. Sri Ramakrishna said, where there's distant ghat and lake where people are gathering, and some ruffians come there and start causing a nuisance, then you send other more powerful ruffians to go and take care of them, you see, because they're not afraid of the police. So Divine Mother will do that. She'll appear as on the battlefield of relativity to destroy all these negativities. But of course, then with such a high ideal, you have to take refuge wholeheartedly in her and allow her, the Shakti, to do the work, to take you beyond Maya into the great Mahamaya, and then into Brahman, because Brahman and Shakti are one, Sri Ramakrishna said. Like fire in its heat, water in its wetness, snow in its whiteness. So in that way, we get this beautiful soul I was saying, called Swami Vivekananda, who can not only read the Riot Act on Maya, can also explain it to you in terms of Advaita Vedanta, this quick, swift path, this sort of discrimination that Mother carries. And at the same time, then bring Ishvara into the picture and show you how everything, as is instanced by this world of different religions, everyone's going towards Ishvara. Christians, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Jews, even the Muslims. I mean, when I say even, I mean they all have this high ideal and form, like Muhammad or Jesus or Buddha or Krishna. So it's such a powerful force in the world through the religious traditions of the world. And they just have to be honored in the right way and taken on traditional, in a traditional way. You can't throw all the religions away and hope people will survive. It's not going to happen. That's naive thinking that came out of the 60s here in America. You've got to practice all the religions, realize them as being one, and then utilize them. These religions are sacred, and they come straight out of the heart of Brahman. And the Divine Mother, she knows this. So that's why she can get into the hearts of all the religious practitioners and wake them up. In this day and age, we just have to turn towards her. And that's one of the great facets of this Ramakrishna incarnation. So that Vivekananda would say things like that. You don't understand. She's my special ideal. There will be no rejuvenation for the world without self-surrender to the Divine Mother. So there you have a person. What I'm trying to say with all these words is a person who's both an Advaitist and a Shakta Advaitist. That is, it's not just I'm going to take one of the good paths or one of the good religions and be satisfied with that. I'm going to take those and study them, and I'm going to have my own way of doing it and my own path to follow. But I'm going to see and stay awake and see that they all merge into that ocean of Brahman. Or dig water, dig a well, find water, and then be happy you have water on your land, but then realize that that water is the same water in your neighbor's land when he digs a well. So all these religions are not one in the sense of how they perceive, but they're one in essence. All religion is indigenous to your soul. Enjoy this time of focusing on Brahman, thoughts on Brahman alone. And it was fitting, wasn't it? Because I started out saying, yes, under Brahman, all these other headings are there. Ishvara is one of those. Ishvara may be the ultimate goal of those who do not yet know about their formless nature. They're thinking in terms of the highest form the human mind can comprehend, and they need a guide. They need an ideal. And that you're probably speaking about most everyone on earth, and in other realms too. In the three worlds, they call it. The Ishvara is going to be extremely important. We're a small group, but small groups are quite often the best kind of groups to have. You can get more independent and individual instruction, and you can hear from, if everyone's participating, you can hear the thoughts of your Sangha members who are all committed to this great work of Swami Vivekananda called Vedanta in the West. It's somewhat like an experiment that we're conducting in spirituality in a very materialistic world. How Westerners are going to respond and come forth and remember this divinity, which is one with their Atman, with their very self. You thought of something, Samanvaya?
Just quickly, I thought of when you were talking about, in Western society and religion, the salvation, and just really connecting that with the name and the form, like a Christ, and then also linking this to the formlessness, but then linking this to the story of Sri Ramakrishna, where he talks about you have a thorn in your body, and of ignorance, and then you take another thorn to pluck out the thorn in your body, in your flesh, but you don't keep that thorn in there, you get rid of it as well. So could you link that to that first form, the one of ignorance, or to that first thorn of ignorance being akin to this sort of this idea of Ishvara, or form, and salvation being just not stuck, but in a way single focused on this idea of being in this name and form and needing salvation, and then taking the thorn of formlessness and plucking out that thorn, and then getting rid of both, because Brahman, our nature is of course formlessness, but Brahman is beyond form and formlessness. So is this a way of sort of proceeding along this path of having that thorn of ignorance? I mean, ignorance, of course, that is ignorance of our formless reality, and therefore the thorn of formless reality will pluck that one out, but then we won't keep that. We'll throw that away too, because Brahman is beyond both, and that's just what came to mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of analogy you could propose. It doesn't work all the way, because when Sri Ramakrishna talked about that two thorns analogy, it was with ignorance and knowledge. The thorn of knowledge plucks out the thorn of ignorance, and then you throw them both away. And, then you end up with this opportunity or this ability to see your formless nature. Because knowledge that will have to go too in the offing. Eventually you'll get beyond knowledge knower and what is to be known. When you learn that well, that triputi, then all of a sudden the gates of formlessness will begin to open up. And there's some stages there that they talk about that are leading up to formlessness. In fact, I was thinking I put a God blog on that, but actually I was writing in a new book last night about that. But basically that's why, it's not going to work really to throw away formlessness as a thorn, unless you throw away the concept of formlessness, because in the non-dual scriptures, you may be speaking from that angle, but in the Ashtabhakra Samhita and Avadhuta Gita and other non-dual scriptures like that, they're going to want the mind to throw away form and formlessness, discrimination and non-discrimination, renunciation and non-renunciation. They go through a lot of these very high teachings, these very high principles that the sadhakas will use to reach formlessness, and make sure that the concepts of them are not limiting the actual realization of them. So that, because those could act as a subtle barrier eventually to actually merging. There'll be a barrier to merging the apparently individualized self into the supreme self, if you want to go back to those words. But yeah, so in a way it works, but to use Sri Ramakrishna's thorn analogy in the way he meant it, he's talking about the duality of ignorance being the thorn in your flesh and knowledge being the thorn that you take the thorn of ignorance out with. Then you have these two thorns. What the hell? What do I do with these two, knowledge and ignorance? So you've got them both under control. So you just toss them. Yeah, I've often said maybe when you get a thorn of flesh, a thorn of ignorance in your flesh, you go to the same bush that you got it from, and you take another thorn off that bush, and that's going to be called knowledge for you, because it's going to take the thorn of ignorance out, and then you can dispose of both of them, and then you're left free of pain, free of suffering, free of the whole bush, as our founder Lex Iksa would say, and immerse the whole being into the greater self, the small self into the great self. Even Lord Buddha used that analogy. There are two selves here. Which one is the real self? The great self is the true self. The smaller self has to be merged into the great self. So that's the Jivatman into the Paramatman, if you want to use the Sanskrit terms. And in that, then all these dualities go away. So thank you this session for all these questions. I'll see you in about an hour. Om Brahmanandam Parmasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamashari Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, knowledge and ignorance, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness, death, and depression, and realize the truth in this very life. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.